I never thought something as simple as putting my trash can out would turn into a full-blown war with my neighbor. Every Thursday morning, like clockwork, I'd wheel my trash can down to the curb, making sure it was neat, lined up, and not blocking anything. But somehow, by the time I came back home in the evening, the can would always be tipped over garbage scattered across the sidewalk like some raccoon had gone wild. At first, I shrugged it off, thinking maybe it really was an animal or the wind or maybe even the garbage truck clipping it. But then I noticed something strange. It only ever happened to my trash can. None of the other neatly lined up cans on the block were touched, just mine. It wasn't until I decided to check my doorbell camera footage that the truth hit me like a brick. There she was, our self-appointed neighborhood queen, the head of the HOA, and the person everyone secretly called Karen behind her back. She strutted down the sidewalk like she owned it, glanced left and right, and then with one swift kick of her sneaker, sent my trash can tumbling over, not once. Not twice, but every single week. She'd even smirk at the camera before walking, off like she had just done her civic duty. I couldn't believe it. Here I was, paying my HOA dues on time, keeping my yard trimmed, following every petty little rule in the neighborhood handbook, and still, she found a way to single me out. I confronted her once, calmly, just to ask why she was doing it. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Trash cans left on the curb make the neighborhood look tacky. If you can't respect the community guidelines, I'll make sure you do." Then she turned on her heel and walked off before I could even respond. That's when I realized this wasn't just about trash. This was about control. She wanted to remind me that in her mind, she ran the neighborhood. And if I didn't fall in line, she'd keep making my life miserable in the most passive-aggressive ways possible. So I decided to fight back, but not in the way she expected. I wasn't going to yell at her. I wasn't going to report her to the HOA board she practically controlled. No, I was going to give her a surprise she definitely wouldn't see coming. I spent a couple of evenings researching online, scrolling through forums of people dealing with nightmare neighbors until I came across an idea that made me grin ear to ear. It was simple, it was genius, and it was perfectly legal. I ordered a few supplies, spent one Saturday afternoon setting it up, and by the time the next trash day rolled around, my curbside looked completely normal. My can was right there where it always was, lined up neatly at the edge of the driveway. Nothing out of place, nothing suspicious. But what Karen didn't know was that the trash can she was about to kick was no longer just a trash can. Trash day came around just like always. I placed my trash can at the curb early in the morning, making sure it looked completely ordinary. No wires showing, nothing out of the ordinary, just another can waiting for pickup. But inside, hidden, just beneath the lid, I had installed a motion-activated air horn. The kind you'd hear at a football game. I had it rigged so that the second someone tilted the can past a certain angle, the horn would blast at full volume. That morning I left for work with a smile on my face. All day I couldn't stop thinking about what was going to happen. I knew Karen's routine by heart. She'd take her little power walk around 10 a.m., clipboard in hand, as if she was inspecting the neighborhood for violations only she could see. Sure enough, when I checked my phone at lunch, I had an alert from my camera. My heart started racing. I pulled up the video, and there she was. Karen marched right up to my driveway, scanned around to make sure nobody was watching, then placed her hands on her hips like some kind of trash inspector. She gave the can one good shove with her foot, expecting it to topple over like always. But instead, the second the can tipped even slightly, the air horn roared like a freight train. The look on her face was priceless. Her whole body jolted back, her arms flailed, and she nearly fell into the street. You could see the shock, the anger, and the humiliation all at once. And the best part? The horn didn't just scare her. It alerted half the block. Neighbors came out onto their porches to see what the noise was, and there was Karen, standing red-faced in front of my can, caught in the act with nowhere to hide. She tried to play it off, pretending she was just checking to see if it was stable, but my camera footage told the real story. And oh, did that footage spread fast? By that evening, nearly everyone in the neighborhood had seen the video. Some laughed, some cheered, and a few even thanked me privately for standing up to her. Because apparently, I wasn't the only one she had been targeting with her petty antics. But Karen didn't take her humiliation lying down. The next day, I found a notice taped to my front door, an official violation from the HOA claiming my trash can had been placed at the curb too early, even though I had followed the rules to the letter. She was clearly trying to flex her authority again, doubling down after getting caught. What she didn't realize, though, was that I wasn't finished. If she wanted a neighborhood battle, I was more than ready to give her one. And my next move? Let's just say it would make her wish she had never laid a finger or a foot on my trash can. The violation notice taped to my door was the last straw. Karen thought she still had the upper hand, that her title as HOA president gave her the authority to intimidate me. But what she didn't realize was that every petty move she made only gave me more fuel and more evidence to use against her. I kept the notice, photographed it, and filed it away with the video footage. I started a folder, my own little Karen case file. If she wanted to play official, I'd play official too, but with a paper trail she couldn't escape from. Still, I knew she wouldn't stop at just one notice. She'd escalate, she always did. And that's when I decided my next move wouldn't just catch her, it would expose her in a way the whole neighborhood couldn't ignore. This time I got a little more creative. I set up a second trash can, identical to the first one, but with a twist. Inside, I placed a motion sensor hooked up to a small, day-packed nothing dangerous, just a bright, washable blue powder. It was the kind used for color runs and parties, perfectly safe, but guaranteed to leave a mark if someone tried to mess with it. To anyone walking by, the can looked completely normal, no different from the rest. The following week, I placed both cans neatly at the curb. One was armed with the air horn again, just in case she hadn't learned her lesson, and the second was prepped with the dye. I knew Karen's routine. She wouldn't be able to resist. And sure enough, right on schedule, my camera lit up with motion. There she was, storming down the street with that same scowl, determined to put me back in line. She didn't even hesitate, she went straight for the new can, as if she was proving some kind of point. She grabbed the lid, yanked it open. And boom, the dye pack burst out in a cloud of bright blue powder, covering her from head to toe. Her white sweater was instantly stained, her face coated, and her hair looked like she had just come from a paintball war zone. The horn went off a split second later, adding insult to injury. She screamed, dropped the lid, and stumbled backward into the grass, coughing and flailing like she had been ambushed. And the cameras? They caught everything. The audio, the dye explosion, the shriek, it was comedy gold. By the end of the day, the clip had spread beyond our neighborhood group chat. Friends were sending it to friends, and somehow it even ended up on a local community Facebook page. People were tagging each other, laughing and commenting about how justice had finally been served on the HOA queen. But the blue powder incident didn't just embarrass her, it enraged her. The next morning I woke up to find not just another violation notice, but 3. One for improper trash storage, one for unsightly property, and another for creating disturbances. She was throwing the entire rule book at me, desperate to claw back control. What she didn't know was that while she was busy trying to bury me in fake violations, I was already 2 steps ahead. I had every recording, every notice, every shred of proof ready to be turned against her. And I was about to use it in a way that would shake her entire little kingdom to its core. I knew Karen would never stop as long as she thought she could bully her way through. She thrived on intimidation, but bullies only have power when people stay silent. So instead of reacting to her phony violations, I started sharing what I had. Quietly at first, I printed screenshots of the video stills, Karen mid-kick, Karen covered in blue powder, Karen red-faced and yelling at thin air, and slipped them into a few neighbors' mailboxes. Not in a malicious way, but as proof, this is what's really going on. And it turned out I wasn't the only one who had been fed up. One by one, people started reaching out. The guy 2 houses down admitted she had fined him for leaving his Christmas lights up 1 week too long. The family across the street said she had threatened to report them for having too many guests parked outside during a birthday party. Even the quiet widow at the end of the cul-de-sac confessed. Karen had once knocked on her door to complain about improperly trimmed hedges. It was like peeling back a lid on a pressure cooker. Everyone had a story, but no one had dared to speak up. And now, with the videos and evidence, they didn't just have complaints, they had proof of her harassment. The next HOA meeting was where things started to get interesting. Normally, Karen strutted in like a queen presiding over her subjects, rattling off violations and fees with that smug smirk plastered on her face. But this time, the energy in the room felt different. People weren't looking at her with fear or submission, they were waiting. When she tried to bring up my so-called violations, I stood up calmly and placed a stack of printed screenshots right on the table. "Before we talk about my trash can," I said, "maybe we should talk about why the HOA president is caught on video vandalizing residents' property." The room went dead silent. Karen's face drained of color. She tried to laugh it off, claiming the footage was taken out of context. That's when I pulled out my phone, tapped play, and let the room hear the air horn blast and see the dye explosion in full color. The laughter that followed wasn't aimed at me. For the first time, Karen looked cornered. Her authority was slipping. But instead of backing down, she doubled down, snapping at the room, insisting she was enforcing the rules for the good of the neighborhood. Except now, nobody was buying it. People started chiming in with their own stories, one after another, and soon the meeting turned into a chorus of grievances aimed squarely at her. That night I walked home knowing something had shifted. The power she clung to so tightly was cracking, and for the first time she wasn't in control of the narrative. But Karen wasn't the type to go down quietly. I could see it in her eyes as the meeting ended. She was planning something bigger. And when I saw what she tried to pull next, I realized the trash can war was only the beginning. I thought the HOA meeting would be the breaking point, that the humiliation alone would finally make her back off. But if there's one thing I underestimated about Karen, it's her obsession with control. She wasn't going to let go quietly. No, she was about to show everyone just how far she was willing to go to cling to her little throne. The very next week, strange things started happening around my property. First, I noticed my mailbox had been left hanging open, with letters shoved halfway out like someone had been snooping. Then, 2 mornings in a row, my sprinklers mysteriously malfunctioned, even though I had just serviced them. And when I reviewed my security footage, guess whose shadowy figure I caught? Lingering near my driveway late at night? That's right, Karen, she was escalating. Not in public this time, but in secret, trying to intimidate me without leaving fingerprints. She must have thought if she did it quietly, she could make me crack before the rest of the neighborhood realize what she was up to. But if she wanted to play sneaky, I was more than ready. I upgraded my cameras, added extra motion-activated lights, and even installed a small decoy device in my yard that looked like another camera. One pointed directly at her house. It wasn't even hooked up, but the red blinking light was enough to make her twitch every time she saw it. And sure enough, it didn't take long before her paranoia started showing. One night, just after midnight, she stormed outside in her bathrobe, marching across the street with a flashlight in hand, shining it at my yard like she was conducting a military inspection. My cameras caught the whole bizarre performance. She paced back and forth, ranting under her breath, before finally stomping back inside. The next day, the retaliation hit harder. I came home to find a thick envelope taped to my front door. Inside was a stack of official-looking notices, each one accusing me of a different violation: improper lawn care, excessive noise, unauthorized modifications. You name it, it was in there. She had even slipped in a threat about potential fines and legal action if I didn't comply. It was the HOA equivalent of carpet bombing. But here's where Karen made her biggest mistake. In her desperation to bury me under fake violations, she forgot that the same neighbors she had been tormenting were now watching her every move. Several of them had started recording too, quietly gathering their own proof of her harassment. And what they caught made my evidence look tame. By now, Karen wasn't just fighting me, she was fighting the entire neighborhood. And as the walls started closing in on her, I knew it was only a matter of time before she made one last, desperate move. And when she finally did, it was bigger, crazier, and far more reckless than anyone could have imagined. Karen had backed herself into a corner, and everyone knows that's when people get the most dangerous. She wasn't just embarrassed anymore, she wasn't just angry, she was desperate. And desperate people make reckless decisions. It all started on a Saturday morning when a letter appeared in everyone's mailbox. Not a friendly neighborhood update, not a reminder about dues, no, this was a manifesto. Pages and pages typed out, signed with her bold, self-important signature. At the bottom, in it, she declared that the neighborhood was falling apart because of disrespectful residents who refused to comply with community standards. She blamed me by name, calling me a disruptive influence who had corrupted others. To defy the HOA, it was insane. She was trying to turn the entire neighborhood against me, painting herself as some kind of savior who had to restore order. But instead of rallying people to her cause, the letter had the opposite effect. My phone buzzed all day with texts from neighbors, screenshots, jokes, and outright laughter. One person said it read like a comic book villain's speech. Another said it sounded like she was running for dictator. But Karen didn't stop there. That evening she pulled her most dramatic stunt yet. As the sun went down, she dragged a folding table out to the middle of the cul-de-sac, set up a stack of bylaw books, and sat there like a sentry. She had a flashlight, a clipboard, and even a whistle hanging around her neck. Every car that passed by, she stopped. Every person who stepped outside, she wrote something down. She was acting like a one-woman police force, patrolling the block as if she owned it. It would have been funny if it wasn't so unsettling. Some neighbors locked their doors. Others peeked out their blinds, recording with their phones. I watched from my porch, stunned, as she actually tried to write a citation for a teenager riding his bike too fast. That's when I realized she was spiraling. She wasn't just abusing her power anymore, she was losing touch with reality. And while most of the neighbors were content to sit back and watch her unravel, I knew I had to stay one step ahead. Because if she was willing to sit in the street with a whistle and a clipboard, there was no telling what she'd try next. And I was right. Because the very next day she unleashed a move so bold, so outrageous, that it didn't just cross the line, it bulldozed right over it. The next morning, I opened my door to find something I couldn't believe at first. Bright, glaring signs plastered all over my front yard. Wooden stakes hammered into the ground, poster boards stapled to them, each one screaming some ridiculous accusation in bold letters. Violator, rule breaker, unfit neighbor. She had even gone so far as to print my name in massive block letters as if I were some kind of criminal. And to top it off, she spray-painted a bright orange line across the edge of my driveway with the words Boundary Marker HOA Patrol. It was outrageous, illegal, completely unhinged. She had literally turned my yard into her personal billboard of shame, trying to humiliate me in front of the entire neighborhood. And yet, instead of isolating me, her stunt backfired spectacularly. By mid-morning, people were gathering on the sidewalks, shaking their heads, snapping pictures, and muttering under their breath. A couple of neighbors even came up to my porch and said, "That's it, enough is enough." But Karen wasn't done. As if the signs weren't crazy enough, she actually went door to door with her clipboard, demanding signatures for what she called a special resolution to have me fined and possibly evicted from the neighborhood, over trash cans. The problem for her was, everyone she approached had already seen the videos, heard the stories, and read her absurd letter. Some slammed the door in her face, others laughed outright, and more than a few told her point blank she was abusing her position. Each rejection only made her angrier, her voice louder, her demands more frantic. By the end of the day, her so-called resolution had exactly 0 signatures, 0, but Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. No, she was gearing up for what she clearly believed was her ultimate power move. Because when I checked, My mailbox that evening, sitting right on top of the usual stack of flyers and bills, was an official-looking envelope stamped with the HOA seal. Inside was a letter, not just another violation, but a summons. She had scheduled an emergency disciplinary hearing with me as the sole subject, and she wanted the entire neighborhood to attend. It was clear what she was planning. This wasn't just about trash cans anymore. She wanted a public spectacle, a trial by humiliation, a last desperate attempt to prove she still ruled the block. But what she didn't realize was that by calling the neighborhood together, she had just handed me the perfect stage. The one moment where all of her lies, all of her schemes, all of her petty power plays would collapse in front of everyone. And I was ready. The so-called emergency disciplinary hearing was scheduled for Thursday evening at the community clubhouse. Normally, these meetings were dull affairs, half-empty rooms, dry conversations about lawn care budgets and pool maintenance, but this time it felt different. The minute I walked in, I could feel the buzz in the air. Every chair was filled. Neighbors lined the back wall, and even a few people who rarely showed up were crammed inside just to see what would happen. But instead of silencing the crowd, her outburst only fueled the murmurs. People leaned toward each other, shaking their heads, some even laughing under their breath. Karen saw it, she felt it, and that's when the mask she always wore began to crack. "You people don't understand," she snapped, her voice breaking. "Without me, this neighborhood would fall apart. The lawns would be a jungle, the houses would look like slums, and none of you would have any standards if it weren't for me keeping order." She jabbed a finger at the audience, her eyes wild. "I have sacrificed everything for this community. And this is how you repay me? Turning on me because of him and his stupid trash can?" She pointed at me like I was some villain orchestrating her downfall. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. I didn't even need to say anything. The room erupted. On its own. Neighbors who had once been silent were speaking over each other now, voices rising. "You fined me for leaving my garage open. You threatened to sue me over a fence. You called animal control on my dog for barking once." Karen tried to shout them down, but it was useless. Her gavel slammed over and over until the head snapped off and flew across the table. She froze for half a second, then did the one thing no one expected. She climbed onto her chair, towering above everyone, waving her clipboard like a sword. "I am this HOA," she shrieked. "And if you don't like it, then maybe you don't belong here at all." The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. That was the moment, the exact second when every single neighbor in that clubhouse realized the truth. This wasn't about rules or standards or community. Pride. This was about one person's ego spiraling completely out of control. And as Karen stood there, breathing heavily, red-faced and defiant, someone in the back of the room finally said what everyone else was thinking. From the back of the room, a calm but firm voice cut through the silence. "Enough is enough, Karen." Everyone turned. It was Mr. Benson, the oldest resident in the neighborhood, the kind of man who never raised his voice and never attended meetings unless it truly mattered. If he was speaking up now, everyone knew it was serious. He stood with surprising steadiness, his arms folded. "We've all tolerated your behavior for years. The fines, the threats, the harassment, but tonight you showed us who you really are. And you don't represent this neighborhood anymore." A ripple of agreement swept through the room. People nodded. Someone clapped quietly, then another. The sound grew louder until it was a wave of applause rolling over Karen's sputtering protests, her face twisted in disbelief. "You can't do this. I'm the president. I'm in charge. None of you have the authority." But she was wrong. Because one of the board members, a woman who had always sat quietly at Karen's side during meetings, suddenly stood. She removed her HOA badge, set it on the table, and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Not anymore." I motioned to remove Karen from her position, effective immediately. The room erupted cheers, clapping, voices calling out, "Seconded," and all in favor. It was chaos, but it was organized chaos, the kind of energy that had been building for years, just waiting for the right moment to boil over. Hands shot into the air, voices shouted, "Aye." louder than I'd ever heard. Karen's jaw dropped. She slammed her clipboard down, rattling the table, but it was no use. The momentum had shifted, and there was no stopping it. She tried one. Last time, her voice shrill and cracking. You can't vote me out. You need me. This place will fall apart without me. But her words were drowned out by the roar of the room. People weren't afraid anymore. They were done. I stood there, watching it all unfold, the folder of evidence still in my hand, but I didn't need to add another word. Karen had destroyed herself. All I had done was hold up a mirror. And yet, even as the crowd celebrated her removal, I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen wasn't finished. Her pride was too big, her obsession too deep. If I knew anything about her by now, it was that she wasn't the type to walk away quietly. And when she finally made her next move, it was the kind of stunt nobody in the neighborhood would ever. Forget, the vote was done. The cheers were real. For the first time in years, people actually left an HOA meeting smiling. Some even shook my hand on the way out, whispering, about time someone stood up to her. For one brief moment, it felt like peace had finally returned to the neighborhood. But if there was one thing I'd learned about Karen, it was this. She thrived on control like oxygen. And the second it was taken from her, she'd suffocate or lash out. The very next morning, proof of that arrived. I woke up to the sound of hammering outside. When I stepped onto my porch, I couldn't believe my eyes. Karen was in the middle of the cul-de-sac, yes, the middle of the street, erecting what looked like a giant homemade podium. Wooden planks, a banner draped across it with bold red. Letters that read, Real HOA, Real Rules. She had a megaphone in one hand and a stack of papers in the other, her hair still wild from the night before. She wasn't president anymore, but that didn't matter. She had declared herself the true authority of the neighborhood, and this was her grand stage. By mid-morning, she was standing up there like some kind of dictator holding a rally, shouting through the megaphone about lawless residents and traitors on the board. Every car that drove past, she stopped, waving her papers and screaming about illegal votes and fake rules. It was so over the top, some neighbors thought it was a prank at first. But no, Karen was dead serious. She had even printed her own fake violation slips, stamped them with a knockoff seal, and started stuffing them into people's mailboxes. She was running a one-woman shadow HOA, completely unhinged and totally out of bounds. The neighborhood gathered on their porches, some filming, some laughing, but nobody daring to approach her. Nobody except me. Because as much as I wanted to let her dig her own grave, I knew Karen wasn't just embarrassing herself anymore. She was disrupting everyone's lives, escalating beyond petty trash can wars into something far bigger. And when I finally confronted her in the middle of the cul-de-sac with half the neighborhood watching, she looked down from her wooden podium, megaphone in hand, and shouted something so shocking, so completely out of left field that the entire block went silent. Karen's voice cracked through the megaphone, louder than it had any right to be. "You're all traitors," she screamed, pointing wildly at the crowd. "You think you can vote me out? You think you can silence me? I built this neighborhood. I kept it clean. Without me, this place will rot like garbage on the curb." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. A few people chuckled under their breath, but Karen wasn't finished. Her face was beet red, her eyes wide and glassy, and then she screamed the words that froze everyone in place. "If you don't follow my rules, I'll tear this place down myself." For a second, nobody moved. The threat hung in the air like heavy smoke. Neighbors exchanged nervous glances. Some clutched their phones tighter, recording. Others slowly stepped back toward their doors. I could feel every eye shift toward me, waiting to see what I'd do. Karen locked her gaze on me, jabbing her finger like I was the root of every evil in her little kingdom. "And you?" she spat through the megaphone. "You started this. You turned them against me. But I'll show all of you." She slammed the megaphone down on her podium with a thud that echoed across the street. Then she grabbed a stack of her fake violation slips and began hurling them into the air like confetti, pages fluttering everywhere, landing in yards, on roofs, and gutters. It was absolute chaos. Karen, standing on her makeshift throne, screaming like a general rallying troops that no longer existed. And that's when it happened. From the corner of the crowd, a voice rang out, strong and steady. "That's it, we're calling the cops." The entire block seemed to exhale at once. Karen froze, still clutching her fake citations, her jaw clenched tight. For the first time, her confidence cracked, not in anger this time, but in fear. She looked around, realizing the neighbors she once controlled weren't backing her anymore. And yet, something in her eyes told me she wasn't done, not even close. If Karen was cornered now, then whatever she did next would be her most dangerous, most unpredictable move yet. Within minutes, the flashing red and blue lights painted the cul-de-sac, bouncing off the windows of every house. 2 squad cars rolled up slowly, their presence alone enough to send murmurs through the crowd. Kids peered from upstairs windows. Dogs barked behind fences, and neighbors gathered in small knots on their lawns, whispering like they were about to witness a showdown. Karen, of course, didn't budge from her podium. If anything, she straightened her back and lifted her chin, like she had been waiting for this moment. "Finally!" She screeched through the megaphone even as the officers walked toward her. "Law enforcement is here to restore order. Arrest him." She jabbed her finger at me with such force I thought she might sprain it. "He's the ringleader. He's the one destroying this neighborhood." The officers exchanged a look, the kind of look that said, "Oh great, another one of these calls." One of them held up his hand, calm and steady. "Ma'am, we got a call about a disturbance. We're going to need you to step down from the structure." Karen's laugh was chilling. "Disturbance? The only disturbance here is him." She shrieked, pointing at me again, then spinning the megaphone toward the crowd. "And all of you, you've been brainwashed. I'm the president of this HOA, and I demand you enforce my authority." The officer sighed. "Ma'am, according to the HOA board, you've been removed from your position. You don't have any legal authority here anymore." It was like watching a glass shatter in slow motion. Her face twisted, her hands clenched so tight the papers crumpled in her fist, and then she screamed, "No one removes me! This neighborhood is mine!" The crowd gasped as she jumped down from the podium, landing hard on the pavement. She stormed toward me, clipboard raised like she might actually swing it. The officers quickly stepped between us, holding her back, their calm tones. "Now firm commands? Ma'am, you need to calm down, put it down. Right now." But Karen didn't calm down. Her voice rose higher, sharper, the words spilling out like fire. "You think you can take my power? You think you can make a fool of me? You'll regret this, all of you will." The neighbors who once cowered now stood shoulder to shoulder, watching in stunned silence as the woman who had ruled over them for years unraveled, completely in front of flashing lights and rolling cameras. And just when it seemed like she might finally break, she did something so unexpected, so reckless, that even the cops froze in disbelief. Karen's eyes darted wildly, her chest heaving as if the whole world had betrayed her. The officers tried to keep their voices steady, repeating commands, but you could see it, the crackling fuse inside her had finally hit the powder, and then she did it. With one sharp motion, Karen snatched the megaphone back from the ground, shoved past the officers, and bolted straight toward my trash can at the curb. That same can she had knocked over countless times before, the symbol of everything she thought she controlled. Before anyone could stop her, she hurled the megaphone inside and yanked a lighter from her pocket. In one smooth, terrifying move, she flicked it open, the tiny flame dancing against the wind, and screamed, "If I can't have this neighborhood, then it all goes up in flames." The crowd erupted in screams and shouts. A couple of neighbors rushed forward instinctively, others pulled back in fear, and the officers sprang into action, tackling her just as the lighter slipped from her grip. It clattered harmlessly to the pavement, but the intent was clear. Karen thrashed and screamed as they restrained her, her voice ragged and raw. "You don't understand? You need me. Without me, this place will fall apart." "You're nothing without me." The officers pinned her, cuffing her wrists as neighbors watched in stunned silence. Some were filming, others covering their mouths in disbelief, and a few were even wiping tears relief mixed with shock that it had come to this. But even as she was being dragged toward the squad car, Karen twisted her head back toward us, her voice breaking but her words sharp enough to pierce the night air. "This isn't over! You'll all see! You'll beg for me back when this place burns without me." And in that chilling moment, as the car door slammed shut and the flashing lights carried her away, a new question gripped the neighborhood. What if Karen wasn't bluffing? The squad cars rolled away, their flashing lights fading into the distance, but the silence they left behind was heavier than the chaos that came before. Neighbors stood frozen in their yards, unsure whether to celebrate or worry. The air was thick with questions no one wanted to voice out loud. I bent down and picked up the lighter Karen had dropped. It was scratched, old, and half-broken, but it was proof enough of how far she was willing to go. A shiver ran down my spine, not because of what she tried to do, but because of what she said before they hauled her off. "This isn't over," the words echoed in everyone's heads. One of the officers had stayed behind to gather statements. He moved from house to house, jotting things down, assuring everyone that Karen would be charged and that the neighborhood could finally breathe. But even he admitted something that made people uneasy: Karen would probably make bail. And if she did, she'd be back. That's when one of my neighbors, Mrs. Delgado, spoke up. Her voice shook as she clutched her phone. What if she already, did something? What if she hid something around here? The murmurs spread quickly. People glanced at their yards, their garages, their porches, as if expecting to find some kind of trap left behind. And then, almost as if the neighborhood itself wanted to stoke the fear, a sound broke the silence. Bang! Everyone jumped. A lid had slammed shut on a trash can 2 houses down. Nobody had touched it. The wind was still, the night quiet, but that lid had clattered as though someone or something had slammed it closed. Every head turned in unison, eyes wide, hearts pounding. For the first time all night, I wasn't sure if Karen was really gone, or if her shadow still lingered, waiting to strike again. Every neighbor's gaze locked on that trash can like it was glowing. Nobody moved at first. The officer, hand resting on his belt, slowly approached it. His boots crunched against the pavement, each step echoing in the tense silence. "Stay back," he warned, motioning for everyone to give him space. The crowd held their breath as he reached for the lid. His fingers curled over the edge, and with one swift motion, he yanked it open. The can wasn't empty. Inside was a stack of papers, neatly bound with string like some kind of twisted dossier. The officer pulled it out and flipped through the first few pages under the glow of the streetlight. His face tightened. "These are names, addresses, notes about each of you." The crowd gasped. People edged closer, trying to see. And sure enough, every household was listed, with unsettling details written in Karen's unmistakable handwriting. Private details. Things no one should have known. "She's been spying on us," one neighbor muttered, horrified. "She knew." "What time my husband leaves for work," Mrs. Delgado whispered, pale as a sheet. "That's written right there." The officer flipped further, his brow furrowing deeper with every page. Then he stopped cold and looked up at me. "You," he said, "you're marked with a red X." My stomach dropped. The neighbors turned to stare. The officer read the note out loud, his voice low but steady. "Target for final lesson." A ripple of shock spread through the crowd. People whispered nervously, some backing away from me like the curse might jump from the page. And in that moment, the victory of seeing Karen hauled off in cuffs evaporated, replaced by something far worse, the realization that her game wasn't finished, and maybe it was only just beginning. The officer set the papers down on the curb, his gloves now smudged with ink from Karen's frantic handwriting. But something about the trash can didn't sit right with him. He crouched lower, tapping the sides, then suddenly froze. "Everyone step back," he barked. The crowd scattered in a heartbeat, pulling children close, retreating up driveways. My pulse thundered in my ears as the officer carefully lifted the bundle of papers out of the can completely. Beneath it, taped crudely to the plastic, was a black box with wires snaking out of it. Gasps shot through the air. Someone screamed. A bomb squad was called immediately. Within minutes, the quiet suburban street looked like a war zone, flashing lights, armored trucks, men in heavy suits. The neighborhood that Karen claimed she was protecting was now locked down, wrapped in police tape. I stood with the others on the opposite side of the street, watching in disbelief as the squad worked. It wasn't a bomb, they later said, but a realistic fake device meant to terrify, not explode. And it worked. Everyone was rattled to their core. When the officers confirmed it was safe, the neighbors let out a collective sigh, but the relief didn't last long. The message Karen had left behind was clear. She wanted to control us even when she was gone. Over the next week, Karen's fate unraveled in the courts. Trespassing, vandalism, harassment, and now terroristic threats. She didn't get to come back on bail this time. The HOA officially dissolved under pressure from the neighborhood, and for the first time in years, people started living like a community again, helping each other, talking freely, no longer glancing nervously over their shoulders. But me? I couldn't shake it? That red X the words target for final lesson. Even now, months later, when I wheel my trash can down to the curb, I sometimes pause and look up the street, half expecting to see her silhouette standing therein. The shadows, watching, waiting, because Karen may be locked away. But the fear she planted, that's not going anywhere. And every time I hear a lid slam shut on a trash can, I wonder, is it just the wind? Or is Karen still keeping score? And that's how a simple trash can feud spiraled into one of the most terrifying HOA nightmares you'll ever hear. What started as petty knocks turned into spying, sabotage, and threats that shook an entire neighborhood. But here's the real question. Do you think Karen is truly finished? Or is this just the calm before the storm? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I'm curious to see what side you're on. If you enjoyed this story and want more wild tales like it, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss the next one. Trust me, the stories only get crazier from here. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the scariest monsters don't hide in the dark. They live right next door.